So it's been a minute since we did a video, and I have to say I apologize because September has been one of those months. So everybody tries to get their affairs in order around about this time. So we've actually been hosting a number of events. Hence, we have not had any videos. So hello there, and we hope you're doing good. So what are we talking about today? You know, we don't like to waste time. Today we're talking about what you should consider when you're doing your estate plan as someone who is a father and is married and has extramarital kids. So we're going to start a series today. And like I said, we're going to start with a married father, and then the next session we'll do somebody else, a single parent, whether a father or a mother, and then we'll give you some pointers on some of the things that you should be considering, because this is where a lot of people actually make mistakes, and this is where you find that a lot of things go out the window because they skipped some of the things that they should have been thinking about, right? So let's not waste any time. Let's get in to the content. Now, let's assume you're a dad here, right? And you're trying to now set your affairs in order to ensure that if something happens to you, there's going to be seamless transition of everything. So what should you be thinking about? Now, if you're someone who says, I want all of my children, whether in the marriage and outside, to benefit, and also my family to remain benefiting as they have been, these are the things that you should consider. One, you need to be considering your financial stand right now, right? And the reason why I say financial stand is because I want you to evaluate your situation of debts. In terms of vehicles, in terms of properties, for example, if you're someone who's primarily paying for the actual property, you got to make sure that there's things that will make sure that are in place. They're going to cover that debt that you're currently covering. For example, you're paying for a mortgage. Do you have something such as a life policy that's going to kick in as soon as something happens to you and that house is covered? Alternatively, do you have something such as a credit life insurance that's going to kick in so that that is covered? Also, with regards to certain respective debts such as credit cards, right, loans, etc. In particular, those you never needed your spouse to accompany you to actually open. What's going on with those? Because those tend to be a surprise for the spouse. So if you're someone who's much more financially prominent than your spouse, you should be considering whether or not those particular debts can be covered as soon as you pass away. Because if not, that's going to be a burden, in particular to your spouse, because now they will have to be figuring out a plan, and we don't want that, right? You want things to move from you to your family seamlessly, so, and you want them to benefit. So that's the first thing you're going to be looking at here. And the reason also this is important for you to be looking at your financial situation, which is also inclusive of your debts, is because I want you to understand approximately how much is your estate planning going to cost you as you're sitting there. Now, remember, if you're married in particular, in community of property, everything that you and your spouse have is looked at jointly. So based on this joint situation, what are the costs going to be, right, to cover the debts that are outstanding? And number two, what are the debts going to be to cover estate administration debts, right? Because remember, as much as you have your own debts, as soon as you die, additional debts erupt. In particular, if you have assets that are valued at 250,000 Rand and more. So automatically that means what? You should have a financial plan here. Okay, if something happens to me, estate administration, how much are they going to be? Or the costs of estate administration, how much are they going to be? If that money is not readily available somewhere right now as we're talking, you need to be thinking about a plan. Where are you going to keep this money? How are you going to come up with it? Are you going to set up an investment? Are you going to probably take out a certain policy? What are you thinking? Because we need this money readily available. And like I said, consider the financial standing of your spouse as well, because like I said, these things can be burdensome if you were primarily the person that was taking care of the whole family, right? Which means what? Which means they probably will not have such cash available to help, put into this estate to make sure that these debts of the estate are covered. And remember, as soon as you pass away, a property has to move from you. meaning that we have to remove your name. We do what we call an endorsement, right? So if the spouse is now going to do this, how much is this going to cost? And that is also something you count along with your estate administration costs, right? And then you make sure that you've got something in place to make it a point that if something happens to you, that money can be easily accessed or readily available to cover all of these nitty-gritties. Now, in terms of leaving the things that you have, now I want you to pay careful attention as to how you're going to leave your things. Remember, you own everything that you currently have with your spouse. So meaning, if you talk about a house that you're leaving behind, you have to understand that that person that you say you're leaving that house to, meaning that the 50% that you own of that house will have to co-own with your spouse. So you need to think about, is this a workable situation here? And if not, is there a different way in which you can do this? Can these people actually work together and stay together in this property? Right? Because this is also what causes havoc, and this is why often people end up selling everything that was left behind and others destitute, because there's really no meeting of the minds after you've passed away. And do not think just because everybody is now in a good relationship, because you're here, that's also going to continue. You have to keep it in mind that people change when they lose loved ones. It just happens, right? So consider that in your mind. If you're leaving certain things to certain individuals, and these individuals will have to co-own with your spouse, question yourself, who's this individual? Is it practical? Is it sensible for me to leave it like this? And then you make a decision on that basis, right? And then something else that you should be considering, your extramarital children. Now, first things first, you could decide to actually plan for them to benefit from you, or you could decide not to, right? It's everybody's choice here. You've got the right to decide how your things will be inherited. You've got freedom of testation here. You're not going to be forced to leave things to people you don't want to leave it to. And it happens that some people have no interest in leaving certain things to some children. But remember, you've got extramarital kids. One of the things that now you should be thinking about is these children. How old are they before you think about excluding them? Because if these children are under the age of 18, now it means that irrespective of you kicking them out of your will, kicking them out of benefiting from the things that you have, you still have an obligation to take care of them. Because by virtue of the law, you are responsible for taking care of them. Now, if you're just going to exclude them like that, this is what's going to happen. The mother of those children will come forward to claim in this estate, right? And according to the law, they should actually, or on behalf of those kids, right, they should get something. And this should be calculated in a sense that it can cover for the maintenance of these children until a certain stage in their lives, right? And so if after calculation, let's say it is said that 500,000 Rand has to be paid towards the maintenance of these kids, what's going to happen is that this is going to actually disrupt the whole estate plan that you had in case you never considered them, because they need to get that money back. And mind you, they take the forefront, because that maintenance that you are supposed to pay to them now starts looking like a debt when we consider it, in the estate itself. So you cannot just simply current them, right? If they are minor children, it's actually sensible that you have some form of plan so that they get something. Or you leave room in the form of liquidity so that they can be able to be accommodated if at all they do come forward. But in most instances, they will do. So you must not think that you can just exclude them when they are at this age. So now let's say you've actually put up a plan now for these minor kids. You've considered that. Now, what if you also want to make sure that they have much more sufficient at their disposal, more than, the maintenance that has, been put aside for them? Maybe you were actually contributing so much to their lifestyle that you want to make sure that they continue to get those things that they need. And maybe you have a desire to fund their education. What's the next plan in this instance? Now, when you get here, you now need to be considering age of the children. You need to be considering if you're putting aside money for these kids to get access to it for schooling purposes, how are you leaving it to them? Because again, if you are now saying, I want them to attain an education with this money, but then you give it to them, the possibility of this not happening. So in a sense, you may want to restrict them. And the way in which you can do this is by setting up an entity such as a trust. This trust doesn't have to last a long period of time. You just have to decide how long it's going to last and for what purpose it's going to exist, right? If you are saying it's just for the purpose of making sure that these kids are taken care of until a certain point in life and they are educated, that's what's going to happen. But the point you're trying to, or rather the point I'm trying to raise, is you need to know the children that you have and the desire that you have in mind so that you can be able to set up things that will work for those kids. It's either you're going to set up something that's going to primarily focus on the extramarital kids, meaning benefit them alone, right? And whatever desires you have for them. Alternatively, you may just set up, something, or a trust rather, that's going to incorporate all of the kids and everybody gets access to monies that they need and for everything that you believe they'll need it for. So this is the time where you now need to be thinking about dynamics. You need to be thinking about the type of kids you have, their age, everything of that nature. Again, age here is important. Why? It is important because if you, for example, were to leave liquidity to kids, those kids can't get access to that. And when I say kids, I mean children under the age of 18. They can't get access to the money. So if you don't have an entity that's going to be set up, that's going to have terms and conditions that you want, what's going to happen is that the money is going directly to the government guardians fund. And that's probably something that you may not want, because you want these kids to access the money the way in which you want, at an amount which you want or desire, under terms and conditions that you have put in place, right? So which means you have to now be thinking about an entity so that you can, number one, make sure that these funds are easily accessible, but at the same time, it's restrictive as to how these kids get access to the money. So which means that you will be able to achieve your goals in a sense, because these kids will get what you had wanted, right? And number two, there's no room for these kids to suffer or these kids to have delayed access to the money, especially if you've got this trust set up right now. Now, again, you need to be thinking now, what are you putting in here? Are you putting in funds? Where are these funds going to come from? Should you be redirecting these funds from anywhere? Is this a life policy? Is this an investment? Let's think about that for a second. Is this something that you're still going to come up with, right? Are you moving in a property? What type of property are you moving in, right? And what type of rights are you going to give to these kids if this is a property that you're going to put in this particular trust? So these are some of the things that you should be thinking about. If you are a dad and you are married and you also have extramarital children, do not think about things in isolation. Make this a holistic view of your things, because when something happens to you, this is why things tend to go haywire, because a lot of the things were missed out on. Hence, I always say, start with the estate planning before you draft your will, so that everything is incorporated and everybody is covered. And also, think about, in particular, if you were taking care of your spouse fully, think about how, if you want to, this can continue to happen even when you're not there. Again, consider the type of spouse that you have, their ability to make money, their ability to take care of the kids. How far did you go in terms of financing everything in this household? And try to plan for things in that regard. See, if you have these people in mind and you have a plan that's meant to cater for everybody, it's difficult for things to go haywire when you pass away. Instead, things are much more smooth and things happen seamlessly so, right? Guys, if I missed out on anything, let's talk in the comment section. But this was some of the things that you should consider as a dad who's trying to plan their affairs, right? Who has children in and out of the marriage and who's also married in community of property. So this was helpful. Make it a point that you send it to someone. Make it a point that you share it so that they can get the type of information that you've gotten here. Obviously, if you want to do a one-on-one estate planning, you're always welcome to contact us and we will set you up. Guys, I will see you next time. And possibly next time I'm going to do a part 2 to this series where we talk about someone who's single and who has a life partner and wants to make sure that things go according to his own or her own plan in mind. Let's talk next time.